Yes, sir. Start.
Good morning, friends. I feel a great pleasure to express my views on the topic intersectionality of social dynamics in Untouchable and the White Tiger. First of all, I want to express my gratitude to the organizing team of national webinar being organized by Department of English, Hindu Girls College, Sonipat. The principal of the college, respected Madam Dr. Bipasa Agrawal ji, the president of the Hindu Charitable Society, Shri Rajiv Agrawal ji, the convener of the webinar, Dr. Neetu Sangwan ji, the organizing secretary, Dr. Poonam ji, and entire department faculties and my lovely audience. In fact, I want to congratulate Department of English, Hindu Girls College for choosing such a pertinent and a relevant theme of the day. In fact, the theme of the conference, Voices of the Marginalized in English Literature. I think that literature is a kind of weapon which captures the voices of the downtrodden, the suppressed, the underdogs, the voiceless people, and the pain, the suffering, the exploitation is something that immediately receives the attention of the sensible soul. So, marginalization and marginalized is a kind of category which was institutionalized and which was given a critical dimension in modern literature and especially after Second World War. But then this marginalization is not only something that is social, political, cultural, economic, but I think if we go back to the origin of literature, we remember the famous incident that produced the first poetic couplet from the mouth of the great Valmiki when he was coming back from the Ganges bath and he came across a pair of conch birds where hunter comes and out of his frolic the hunter kills the he bird and the she bird out of separation she starts crying with pain. And Valmiki, the great poet, he spoke out the famous sloka, Ma Nishad Pratishtham Shashwati Tvam Gama Yat Kronch Mithuna Dekam Vadhi Kam Mohitam. Similarly, if we come to English romantic poetry, Wordsworth, the poet and priest of nature, he talks about the still sad music of humanity in his famous poem Tinternabhe. And the Hindi poet Sumitra Nandan Pant, he talks about this viyog, this pain, this suffering as the origin of great literature when he says, वियोगी होगा पहला कवि, आह से उपजा होगा गान, उमड़ कर आंखों से चुपचाप बही होगी कविता अनजान. So what I mean to submit that marginalization and marginalized, they are of course a literary category after post-World War literature. But I find since the beginning of creation, we find writers and philosophers. They have tried to capture the pangs, the agony, the suffering of the humanity in their works. Now, when we talk about marginalized, basically this term refers to a state of separation and exclusion of community or people. Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, he talked about it very concretely. Savitribai Phule and Jyotibai Phule, who were great advocates of marginalized people in India, they addressed this issue very pertinently and very wisely. And they not only talked about this problem, they also gave solution to the problem. And Savitribai Phule, she opened first a school for the girls, and that was the landmark in the marginalized community, and it became a kind of milestone for those who were suffering, who are suffering today. So the point is, when we look at the marginalized, this term comes under the umbrella term Dalit aesthetics. And when we talk about Dalit aesthetics, we cannot ignore and do without the great critic Limbale. Limbale, who wrote the famous book Dalit Aesthetics. And through Dalit aesthetics, he wants to just dismantle and deconstruct the canonical literature. And he wanted to give an alternative discourse for those people who have not been given space and representation by the classical writers. We remember the book Juthan by Om Prakash Valmiki. And there are many more. If we talk about the great Hindi novelist Premchand, who famously wrote the novels like Godan. And in Godan, if we look at the character of Hori, who is a worker, who works in the field of others, and his son Gobar. So not only their names, but their, life, it itself speaks about the predicament of the marginalized people in society. But this kind of predicament does not end up the dreams and expectation of these people. These people have also dreams about a happy life because they are basically human beings. If we talk about this marginalized, we must discuss the great critic Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, who wrote the famous essay, Can the Subaltern Speak? And through this essay, Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, she talks about a kind of perspective that is quite different from Western perspective. And she talks about the issues and challenges which befall the life, the existence of the downtrodden. Here, she not only talks about the economically weaker section of society, she also talks about the tribal people, the women, especially in third world countries, and she asserts that these people need to be addressed and need to be represented from a different perspective, because we cannot apply Western perspective in order to understand, in order to address the issues and challenges of tribal people, women, and those people who are suffering otherwise. So she repeatedly talks about this issue, and she emphasizes the fact that these subaltern people, these marginalized people, these underprivileged people will definitely come out with their stature, with their reality, and writers are talking about them. And for this, I have chosen two writers and their two works. For example, Untouchable by Mulk Anand and The White Tiger by Arvind Adiga. So when we look at these two works, what we find that these writers are focusing on a kind of intersectionality of social dynamics in the life of the Indian society. Untouchable, as we know, Mahatma Gandhi says untouchability is a great curse for humanity. And the protagonist of this novel, Bakha, who is a sweeper boy, and he has to do the work of cleaning the latrine and all the leftovers which he doesn't like to do. And his father, Lakha, he is quite compromising, something like Hori in Godan. Hori in Godan and Bakha in Untouchable, they are characters who have just surrendered themselves to their fate, to their destiny. But their sons, Bakha and Gobar, they are rebellious, they are revolutionary, and they want to change the structure of society, and they question the caste system, because it is the caste system in North India that is the root cause of social disparity, social inequality, and the kind of exploitation and marginality that they are suffering from. Bakha, he remains untouchable, but then he is not a silent sufferer like his father. Bakha revolts, he protests, he raises slogan against the existing social structure, and he questions that why people are not giving respect to him and his father and his sister, and he is always behaving like a rebel, and he also wants to find solution as he is a suffering and oppressed son of Lakha. People like Christian missionary Colonel Hutchinson, he also tries to exploit him, and he also takes him to church for religious conversion. But Bakha does not go for religious conversion. After that, he also attends a public meeting where Mahatma Gandhi, father of nation, comes to address the people, and Gandhi addressed the problem of untouchability, the problem of caste system, and he also introduced the term Harijan for these people, because Gandhi believed that these people, like others, they are sons, they are children of God. So why this social discrimination? Why they are excluded from the mainstream society, from the political power? So this kind of thing goes on, but then Bakha does not find adequate solution to the problem. This problem persists. He also comes to know that the Britishers, the European machinery introduced a kind of flush system into India, and that will help to root out the problem of untouchability, because through flush system all the problem of cleanliness of latrines and other untouchability problems, they can be sorted out. So from the beginning to the end of this novel, we find that how marginalized people, how downtrodden people like Bakha, Lakha, his sister Sohini, how they are suffering, and how they are suffering ad infinitum, and there is no end of their suffering. They are suffering because of caste system. They are suffering because of social exclusion. They are suffering from a kind of blind man's alley from which there is no escape for these people. So untouchability remains a problem. But this novel ignites the sensibility of scholars and critics and readers like us. When we look at this problem, we are fired with question about the social structure of our Indian society, and we are compelled to think this is not something that is made by God. This is something that is man-made. This is made by those people who are a kind of conservative people, those who want to just satisfy their whims and fancies, and they want to hegemonize a larger community, the larger part of India, who have played vital roles in making India independent. And they are also contributing to socio-economic and political stability of the country. So, when Gramsci introduced the term hegemony, he wanted to talk about the domination of the larger community, the mass, by a group of people, the elite class. And this is something that must be continuously addressed in our discourse today. So this is very important. If we look at the second novel, The White Tiger, well, in this novel, Arvind Adiga focus on the same issue of marginality, and he has made quite different from Aristotelian choice of protagonist. Arvind Adiga chose character from marginalized community. Balaram Halwai, who belongs to a Halwai caste, a caste who does cooking, who prepares sweets for the society, and Balaram, who belong to Bihar, and this Balaram has seen the exploitation, the suppression of his people in the hands of upper caste people in Bihar, and he wanted to revolt against this, and he revolts also. He could not study for long, although he is a very promising boy. He was a very intelligent boy, and for his intelligence, for his promises, the teacher called him the White Tiger. So the White Tiger is a metaphor of all those marginalized people who are intelligent, who are born with the same potential, but then society and hegemonic society, it does not give a space to a person like Balaram Halwai, person like Bakha, person like Gobar to prosper and to develop. So this novel opens the eyes of all of us, and this Balaram, under the economic, social compulsion, he has to leave his studies and he has to shift to Delhi, where he finds some kind of open atmosphere, where he just started writing the history of his life from a different perspective, and he gets the job of driver in the family of Mr. Ashok Sharma, who represents an upper caste society in Bihar. So he does work with him. He is the employee of Mr. Ashok, but then Mr. Balaram is very much, angry. He is full of resentment towards Ashok because he does not like the capitalistic and materialistic wage of life of Ashok, and he has seen how in different parties and celebration these upper caste people, they are behaving like animals, and how due to drink and some kind of consumerist approach towards life, These people are not ready to understand, recognize the identity of lower caste people, the marginalized people. And this Balaram, he is so full of anger that finally, out of anger, he kills his own owner of the car, Mr. Ashok Sharma. So this is something that is apocalyptic. It is something that takes place like the climax of a drama, like the climax of a great tragedy. So the point is, why Balaram becomes a murderer? Why Baka becomes a rebel? That is the question that has to be addressed in this seminar, in this discourse. When we talk about Modi government today, Modi government is doing her level best to eradicate the problem of untouchability. In our National Education Policy 2020, we find that the Education Ministry has laid down rules and regulations for making the local vocal, and it also talks about the regional language. It also talks about marginalized people. This is very good step. But then this is not enough, because by making laws and policies, we cannot root out the problem of untouchability, the problem of excluded people like Balaram and Baka. So what is important? The important thing is, as Balaram says, I quote, the problem of caste system. In the old age, there were 1000 castes and differences in India. These days, there are just two castes, men with big belly and men with a small belly, and only two destinies, eat or get eaten up, unquote. So what he means to tell us, that society has been reduced to two class of people, one who are working just to earn 2 square meal a day, but there is another category, there is another group who are, have, who are so prosperous, who are bourgeois, who are so much affluent that they are dying of eating. And this kind of situation, if I talk about the present Prime Minister who says, na main khaunga na khane dunga, but Balaram says the condition of Indian society, there are two kinds of India, as Arvind Adiga has said. One India is the white India, another India is the dark India. So the white India is the India where only a small group of people, the class of people, they are enjoying everything. But there is a larger India that is dark. That India is not receiving what it should receive. And that's why it is responsible for the unbridgeable gap between the rich and the poor. So when we look at these two novels, we find that the social dynamics, they are not something that is static. They are something that is dynamic. We find there is intersection of caste, color, class, language, and many more. So this kind of situation creates a syndrome. It creates a kind of complex wave of interpersonal paradigm, and due to this we find people are suffering, the larger audience, they are suffering, and this kind of thing paves the way for the rise of capitalism, for the rise of bourgeois, for the rise of those state of society which can obliterate the existence of the common people, the have-nots, the underdogs and underprivileged. So this is very important to know that the voices of marginalization and marginalized people in literature. They are very important because, after all, what is the function of literature? The function of literature is not only to talk about aesthetics. The function of literature is not what John Keats wrote, a thing of beauty, joy forever. But the function of literature is to awaken the sensibility of people. And I am agree to the German critic Brecht, who talks about epic theatre, and he challenged the Aristotelian principle of catharsis, where audience are, emotionally excited. The emotion of pity and fear are aroused, and there is a kind of suspense. Brecht says the function of literature is not only to create emotional pools, rather the function of literature is to open the eyes of audience. So, reading these novels, Untouchable and White Tiger, they make us not Aristotelian audience. These novels make us Brechtian audience. And this is how the audience are, prepared to just take up the cudgel against the suppression, the exploitation, the victimization, the exclusion. And that's why the literature, the poem, the novel, the drama, the essay, which talks about if we talk about the essay like Those Who Walk Away from Omelas, these works address the same problem, and they tell us how rich people, how sophisticated people, how the so-called educated people have no time for these suffering people. William Blake, the great romantic, he wrote the poem London, and in that poem he also wrote the poem The Chimney Sweeper, and in these poems he talks about the problem of child labor, and he attacks the so-called prosperity of England, which has no place and which has no discourse for addressing the problems of the marginalized. Similarly, if we look at India today, this marginalization, the Dalit aesthetic, it is becoming very powerful discourse these days. And not only this, if we talk about literature that talks about diaspora and migration, this also directly or indirectly it talks about the same issue of marginalization and marginalized. So I call upon the scholars, the students and the writers to please come up with a kind of compassionate, a kind of critical, a kind of creative construct by which we can be able to address the issues and challenges of the marginalized people. And this is how we can be able to do justice to the theme of the national webinar, which Department of English, Hindu Girls College, Sonipat, MD University has decided for this session. I also want to felicitate the Dean Humanities and Language, MD University, respected Professor Randeep Ranaji, my friend, philosopher and guide, man of letters, especially in India. So I express my gratitude to my friends, to my seniors, and I wish that this conference will come up with a kind of solution, with a kind of alternative remedy, alternative idea and opinion, and a kind of perspective which will definitely go a long way to address and to sort out the enigma, the challenges of the marginalized and the Dalit aesthetics. So once again, I express my gratitude to the respected President of Hindu Charitable Society, the Principal of Hindu Girls College, the convener of this webinar, and the organizing secretary for inviting me to be a resource person on this theme. So once again, thank you so much.